Close to Home, written by Malika Grant, illustrated by Polka Art Studios. The oak tree in the backyard turned orange, then brown, and then finally shed all of its leaves. It was a season for change. Summer's time was up, and autumn had come to take its place. A 6-year-old boy named Carlos Elamin had been watching the changes happening all around him with curious and keen eyes. The ants were busy carrying food to their underground caverns deep below the green grass. They marched in a straight line along an invisible trail. Chipmunks darted here and there with nuts in their fat cheeks. They too were preparing to store up food for the winter. Up in the sky, a flock of noisy geese formed a V shape and honked their goodbyes to Carlos as they flew south for the winter. When they disappeared into a dark gray cloud, Carlos let out a loud sigh. "What's the matter, honey?" asked his mother. She was sitting on the sofa near the window. "I wish I could fly like that," said Carlos. "Like those geese, I mean. Wouldn't that be cool?" His mother laughed and said, "Well, you might not be able to grow wings and take off into the air, but you certainly can fly if you want to." Carlos wanted to know how. "Easy. You could become an astronaut and go deep into space. You could ride in a rocket ship and explore the stars and the planets." "What if I float away and never come back?" Carlos said sadly. "I don't think I would like that at all." Carlos's mother thought for a while and decided he was right. Maybe going to space wasn't the best idea for him after all. She offered another suggestion. "Sometimes, when we go swimming at the beach, I feel like I'm soaring across the ocean's waters. Maybe you could become a deep-sea explorer and fly with different fish and turtles and—" Carlos shook his head. No. What if a big whale comes along and eats me while I'm swimming? I don't think I would like that at all." His mommy reassured him. "Whales can't swallow people, not even if they're as small and cute as you, Carlos," she said. This didn't make Carlos feel any better. He stared out of the window and watched as a little brown squirrel jumped from one branch to the next. Suddenly, Carlos' mom had another idea. "Say, I know what would be great. You could be a paratrooper and jump from those big airplanes in the sky," she said brightly. "I've always wanted to try that. Wouldn't that be great? Then you could hear the wind rushing by your ears." Carlos shook his head again. He did not think being a paratrooper would be a great idea at all. "What if I jump from the plane and one of those geese flies into my parachute?" He was very worried. "Have you seen what happens to a balloon when it gets a hole in it?" Carlos clapped his hands together and shouted, "Pop!" Just then, Carlos' daddy walked into the room. He was wearing heavy boots and a green jacket to protect him from the cold outside. Carlos beamed when his father picked him up in a big hug. Daddy had been working on his car in the garage and smelled like engine oil and soap. His thick beard tickled Carlos' face. "What's the word today, son?" he asked. "Carlos wants to fly, but we can't figure out the best way to get him up in the sky," said Mommy. Daddy had a silly smile on his face. It was the same look he always had before he started a tickle fight or played a pretend wrestling match. Carlos started giggling. "I know how Carlos can fly," said Daddy. He held Carlos by the wrist and began to swing him in a circle with his strong arms. Carlos hollered happily, "Faster, Daddy! Swing me higher!" Soon the room was a blurry haze of color, shapes, and light. Daddy set Carlos on his feet, but he was too dizzy and toppled on the floor, laughing the whole time. "Had enough?" asked Daddy. Yes, laughed Carlos. "I really felt like I was flying." Mommy shook her head at the two of them and chuckled to herself. Carlos and Daddy always made up the best games when they played together. "Now that you know what it's like to fly, are you going to give any of those other things we talked about a try?" she asked. She pointed to the window and up to the big blue sky outside. Carlos nodded his head and hugged both his parents tightly. He was feeling much more confident and excited now. Yep, as long as I can stay close to home with you and Daddy, I know I can always try new things.